Hey y'all, welcome to my mother's channel, Life with Lorelai. This is Rory here. Today I'm going to show you how to make a yarn ball that your cats will go crazy over. I have two of the ones I made for them over Christmas here. As you can see, here's a big ball that I made and a medium-sized ball, and they're rather well loved and fuzzy because of their little claws. So today I'm going to show you how to make a smaller ball, and I'll leave descriptions on how to make the bigger and medium-sized ball in the link below. So make sure you just got your hook, your needle, and a pair of scissors to cut the yarn, and either the well, I actually don't know what sizes these are, but you don't want the smallest loom. You want either the second or second largest loom to work with for this. That way we have a little bit more to work around. So you're going to want to see how thick your yarn is. Like this one's pretty thin. But depending on how thick yours are, you can have just one. Today we're going to use two because of how thin mine is. I'm just going to unwind it a bit. And match up the ends, and we're going to create a slip knot. First you want a pretty long string, because we're going to use this to sew up our ball and make a drawstring at the end of the video. So you're just going to make a simple little loop and fold that loop over the top half of the string to the bottom and make a loop out of that bottom string. It'll just easily come undone if you yank it, no knots, and that's just all we need. You're going to attach that slip knot to the very first peg on your loom, right next to the anchor, and tighten it. And you can just tuck your tail into the hole in the middle of the loom, and you're good to go. Ooh, yarn ball spinning. That's always fun. So, now we're going to just cast on. We've got our first stitch here. We're going to wrap our working yarn, the one you've got in your hand attached to the two balls, around our next peg, and you're going to take the bottom wrap and pull it over the top to create our first knit stitch for the cast on. And you're going to do this 6 times. So right now we got 3 of our 6, including the one we started with. 4, 5, and 6. Now for the medium and large balls, you're going to want to go 8 for the medium, and you're going to want to go 12 for the large. Sometimes it helps if you put a piece of tape over your loom, just a little different colored tape. That way you know where you can stop and where you can go forward from. So we're just going to go wrapping our way back to knit. We're going to skip the last peg we knitted. In most knitting patterns, you actually go back and wrap your work around that peg you just knitted and pull over. But in this one, for the ball, since we want it to be curved more, we're going to go ahead and skip that. That means this will have less stitches and make it curve in on itself more. So we're just going to take our working yarn back behind the second peg, wrap it around into the little hook area that the peg has, take our hook, pull up and over that new bit of yarn and push down. And that's just our knit stitch. And we're just going to go back to the beginning, doing all knit. Didn't want to go. Now sometimes, depending on how tight you wrap around your peg, it might be a little difficult to pull up and over. I know I happen to do it a little bit tighter than probably needs to, so sometimes I have to fight a little bit more. So Once again, we're going to skip this peg, but now we're going to change it up. Every time we go from our first peg to our end, right to left, we're going to purl. Every time we go left to right, we're going to knit. So, and this is from here on out. You're just going to bring your yarn to the front of your work in between those first 2 pegs. You're going to take your hook, put it from the top, underneath, and back up through your stitch there, as if you were trying to pull it off the loom, and hook it around and underneath the working yarn to pull it through and create a new loop. And that's your purl stitch. You just pull that old loop over and tighten. So, make a new loop. Oop, slide out from underneath me. Pull up and over with the old, tighten the new. We are, however, going to stop on this 3rd peg from the left, so we can begin our pattern for the first section of the ball. There's going to be 4 sections in total of us working for this ball, 4 for the medium and 6 for the large. So pretty much a section is just me stopping here and then until I can go back and forth across all of them again. So you're going to take your working yarn, take it behind the peg to the one on its right, wrap it around, and knit just the one. So then you're going to bring your working yarn back through, skip this peg, you're going to purl, if my loom will allow me, you're just going to purl 2 stitches. Sometimes those rascals want to jump off the peg while you're tightening them. So you're going to purl twice. You're going to skip the peg again, wrap around, wrap around, wrap around, knit over, knit over, knit over, and just push them all down. Skip the peg, braid in between, and now we're going to purl to the end. So now we've made it all the way to the end here. Again, like I said, we're not going to do either end so that it curves nicely. We're going to skip this peg and knit all the way back to the beginning. So it sometimes helps if you just do this compared to going wrapping one at a time, knitting over, wrapping, knitting over, wrapping, knitting over, because you can just do all the steps together and at once. And you can do something like this for pushing down. So now this is where you get to choose. The video I learned this tutorial off of has you going right back into our next section. So you can either be done with your first section after this, or you can go on and do an additional step, which is what I like to do, which is where I go back and I purl back to the beginning and knit back and then start the next section. Or you can just purl to this 3rd peg again and continue on with your next section going back and forth. So if you're taking option number 1, just go ahead and fast forward through the video, and option 2 people and myself will meet you when we start our next section. So we're just gonna get purling and knitting done. And then skip the last peg, knit back. And once we're done with this, we'll knit back up with people who took option 1. The only real difference is it adds just a little bit more yarn and volume to the ball, but not a lot. So hopefully you have now what looks a little bit like the ton on your tennis shoes. It'll start looking like it a little bit more. And what I find funny is on some of the larger ones, it starts looking like you're knitting a child a diaper. And it just like makes me laugh. So now we're just going to go start on that next section. So now that we've joined back with people who did option number 1. So again, just purl, skipping this peg, the very first one, and stop after you hit the 3rd from the left. So we want 2 pegs that we haven't purled to the left of where we stopped. Go. And we're going to bring our working yarn back and around the peg to the right, knit over, push down, purl 2, so pretty much every time you change direction you're just going to add 1 more stitch to what you've done. So we just did 2 purls, now we're going to do 3 knits. Once we're done with 3 knits, we'll do 4 purls. So when it comes to the big ball and the medium ball, you will have a different stopping point than what you have now. For instance, the medium ball, you want to have 3 pegs that don't have any yarn on them once you start going back and forth like this. And for the large ball, you want 4 to the left of the first time you start going back and forth. So more directions on that will be down below in the description. Now we've made it all the way back to the front with just knitting. And again, people who take option 1, you can just continue on by stopping here and purling and going back and forth again. People who take option 2 can follow along with me as I purl all the way to the end and knit back. So, working yarn to the front. Almost lost my hook. We've purled to the end, knit, back to the beginning, and we'll have met back with people who took option 1. So. Now you're hopefully seeing something that looks more like a ton again. So it'll probably end up being about this long halfway through your loom when we're done. And then hopefully we'll get through. Okay, so now we should have met back up with you option 1 people. It's starting to look more like the ton and everything. It should probably get about halfway to your loom by the time we're done with this small little ball. And we'll see. So now we're going to start on our 3rd section. So bring the working yarn through the middle of your first 2 pegs. We're going to purl. My yarn got tangled in the knot. Okay, skip and wrap, knit over, skip and purl, skip, wrap, and knit over, skip, purl to end, skip, knit to beginning. And again, option 1, just go ahead and continue on to here and go back and forth. Option 2, we're going to purl to end, knit to beginning. Okay, so now this is what it looks like with 3 sections done. So as you can tell, this side has more of the knitted stitches on it. This side has more of a weaving fishtail-ish look. So you guys can see that okay? The difference in the sides at all. So it's getting longer now. So there we go. I think it's looking okay. So now we've knit back up with option 1 people at the very beginning of our row again, and we're going to start on our 4th and final section. So you're going to take your yarn, pull it through those first 2, purl, 1, 2, and 3. Make sure you have the appropriate amount of yarn for your ball on the left side of your working strand. Skip the peg you're working on, wrap around and knit, skip and purl, 1, 2. There's 1 empty space over here, so until there's 1 empty space over on this side. 1, 2, 3. 1 empty space over here. Purl to the end of our project. is one thing that I don't like about some of the looms is their little channels can be a little tricky to navigate with the hook, and then you end up catching the yarn. It causes a problem when you're trying to purl sometimes. But don't worry, if that happens and you snag your yarn a little bit, it's not going to be the end of the world. It'll end up straightening out in your project. No one will be the wiser. So, knit back to the beginning. And option 1, people, you are done and can skip ahead. Oop, haha, I'm a klutz. You can go ahead and skip ahead to the sewing portion. And then option 2, we're going to go ahead and do our purling and knitting one last time. And meet back up with option 1, it's sewing. So, and pretty much this part you can just cut out now, or fast forward through. Okay, so now we've met back up with option 1, and as you can see, we've got our full ball here. This is all we need. As you can see, it's kind of more straight on this side and curved on this side. That's kind of good. And it's very easily stretchable, so that's also nice. One nice thing about yarn. You're going to want to take your working yarn, and you're actually going to want to send it back to the far side of your project, away from where you're working, where your tail yarn is. So right now they're on the same side, so we're going to go ahead and purl back over to the left and leave our yarn over there. This yarn will be used for the drawstring of our project. And there we go. Now at this point in the video, you can go ahead and kind of measure out, just eyeballing it, how long your tail is compared to your working yarn. And just cut your working yarn roughly about as long as your tail, and it'll be fine. So you can just roll up the rest of your yarn and put it off to the side for now. I'm going to leave our old strand in there, and we're going to bring our tail that we had from the beginning of our project, which will be at the very end of it here. We're going to bring the 2 threads together, kind of twist them together so it makes it a little easier to pass through our loom needle. Some people call it a tapestry needle as well, which I find a little interesting. So just make sure it's got a pretty decent tail going through there so you can work easily. And this is where things start to get tricky. So we're going to take our yarn and needle, and we're going to take it from the top down through, kind of like we're purling, and bring it out underneath our stitch. We're going to, of course, pull our yarn all the way through. And we're going to go ahead and take it off. But keep that loop just a little bit up on top of there for right now, because we're going to need to take our yarn needle and slip it through a pair of stitches that is right here. And that's from one of our previous rows of going back and forth. And we're going to need to slip our needle from the right side through the left of that, like this. Unfortunately, the colors I have there, it makes it probably a little hard to see on the video, but depending on the colors you use, it may be helpful. Okay, so now that we've just pulled this loop off and we have made sure that it's nice and tight, our working strand here, we now need to find what I like to call the fish tail. And it's just these little loops, which can be found right here, where it goes like this. I'm pointing out with my needle. And into another loop, which the loop it goes into comes from underneath, around, and into the one in front of it. So we need to find those. So we got our first one here and our second one here on the outside. We're going to come to the inside and find that second one's first loop. We're going to bring the needle through, turn it back over towards our first. Oh, I lost it. It can be very tricky. Now we got it underneath the first inside of the first fishtail. Now we're going to go to the outside of the first fishtail, bring it back enough to bring it to the inside of that outside one, so we can poke it to the outside. And that will be going in between the stitches like we did with the loom here. So it's very tricky to do on the very first one, which is why you really need to focus on that and why I really explained the fishtail. And throughout the rest of it, it's actually going to be easier. That very first one, though, since it's so close to the loom, is very difficult. So that's why you want to go really slow with that first one to make sure you get it right. And then you just keep going all the way around this circle. I'm not the most coordinated person in the world, but we'll figure this out. So, pardon me if I need to pull the loom out of shot for a second to double check where my stitch is. I will try and put it back in frame when that happens. So, one last one for the circle. And we can pull tight and make sure there's no space on the end. There's going to be a little bit of one. So sometimes you really have to pull tight, but there we go. Now we're going to take our yarn and we're going to find our first stitch along the side here. And we're going to poke our way through that, top to bottom. Pull through. And just like we did with this first one here, we're going to go top, bottom here. And I can get my yarn untangled. Pull it off and bring the yarn through the stitch that was at the side. And pull tight. Go back up here, find another one of your stitches. Pull tight. Top down. Through the stitch at the side. And off the loom. Now with the big ball and the medium ball, you're going to want to leave 3 of these stitches on the loom to start with the drawstring. But for this small ball, we're only going to leave 2 of them. So we're going to find one more stitch at the top. There we go. Make sure your yarn's not trying to attach itself to the loom, like mine likes to do. Find the stitch at the side. Pull off and tighten. So, And we have most of our yarn ball finished now. So now we just need to finish up the drawstring. Now we're just going to take our yarn and weave it through. We're not going to be precise or finicky, and just making sure it's going through some of the sides here, and until we can go all the way around. Oop, my loops came off. So let's go tighten this up so that hopefully it stops doing that. There we go. And you can just go through, you can also find some of the stitches from the side and go through them like this. You'll know they're stitches because you'll see little bumps. I've got 3 of them on my needle right now. And just kind of twist the yarn to get it through there. Okay, so you've made your way all the way around here by now, hopefully. And once you get to these 2 loops, you're going to go like you were trying to take them off again, but you're going to leave them on. So you're going to go top down, and instead of going through a stitch, you're going to go to the next one over and top down it as well. Then you can pull off and tighten it just a little bit. And that will be the one side of the drawstring. Now you're going to take this one, the tail we made out of your working yarn to make this, twist the ends so that it will go through the needle, and we're pretty much going to make the same path we made for the first string, just going the opposite way so it ends up on this side compared to this one. So just find your little loops and niches. There we go. Just kind of like that. You can do some of these in there. If you wanted some of the different color to show through, you can go like this. Pretty much just the basic idea is getting that string over to this side. And you're done sewing it up. And now we can fill it with some fiberfill and catnip. Really simple. Sometimes, depending on how you do it though, the yarn for the drawstring, when you pull it closed, it may sometimes be difficult to get back open. So you'll just need to kind of massage it, and it will slowly start to open up enough for you to do whatever you need to do. Fill it with some more fiberfill, some more catnip, whatever. You can take out the fiberfill to wash the yarn ball and everything if your kittens have gotten it dirty. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so this next part is super easy. You've just got some nice little fluffy stuff here. You can also get some paper to make it crunchy or some bells to fill it with. You can have it with catnip or without. I just got this catnip from our local grocery store, and you just place your filling into a little bowl to kind of catch the excess, or over a trash can. I personally like the bowl so you can catch the stuff that comes off and put it back in the bag later. And you just need a tiny little bit of catnip, not much at all, and you're just going to sprinkle it on top of the fiberfill. And you're just going to pick that up and kind of mush it around so it spreads all throughout. The fiberfill will catch onto the dried herb and hold it really well, and it also brings out the scent of the catnip better when you're messing around with it with your fingers, crushing the leaves. So you can also go back into your bowl, because as you can see, a lot of it drops down. You can go back in and just run the fiberfill around on it to kind of catch some more of that back up. So, and then all you do is you just get your pre-made yarn ball, that we just finished and just fill it with the fiber fill. It'll scrunch down really easy, and you're just going to pull those strings super tight. So make sure your project's nice and closed up, and you're just going to make a simple little bow to go on the very top of it. So make the knot, one little loop, two little loop, make sure they're even. And what I like to do is I like to bring the strings down to the same area, like this, and just knot the loops for extra measure, and just trim up the excess yarn. So now the nice thing about this extra bit of string, you can save it aside in a little plastic bag for any extra products you use, depending on how large or small they are. These may be a little bit too small, so you can use them as filling for another yarn ball if you like. But these, since they're longer, you can make a slip knot on the end of one and attach it to a project for a nice little tassel. And you can just trim down the edges to whatever length you want. So little ends like that are good for saving for just any project that comes along. You never know when it might come in handy. So, and that's how you make a catnip toy for your cat. Just a cute little fluffy ball like this. Have fun!